Yes.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. Through storytelling and conversational interviews, this weekly radio show offers listeners first-hand insight in starting and running a business, the ups and downs of risk-taking, and the commonalities of successful people. Connect with Kerry through her candid, often funny, and informative weekly blog, where you'll read and comment on life as wife, mother, daughter, and entrepreneur. And now it's time for Kerry McCoy to get all up in your business.
I'm Kerry McCoy, and it's time for me to get up in your business. For the next hour, my guest, attorney Gary Greene, and I will be getting up in the business of being a successful attorney and entrepreneur. Gary practiced law for 13 years before deciding in 1991 to open his own law firm, the Law Offices of Gary Greene. We hope through our storytelling of how we maneuvered the path of entrepreneurship in pursuit of our dreams that you will learn something, want to get involved, or be inspired to take action in your own life. And we'll be answering questions via phone and email, a little bit of free lawyer advice. For me, it began over 40 years ago when I founded Arkansas Flag and Banner. During the last 4 decades, Arkansas Flag and Banner has grown and morphed from door-to-door sales to telemarketing to mail order and catalog sales, and now relies heavily on the internet. Each change in sales strategy required a change in company thinking and procedures. My confidence, leadership knowledge, and my company grew. My initial $400 investment now produces nearly $4 million in annual sales. Each week on this show, you'll hear candid conversations between me and my guest about real-world experiences on a variety of businesses and topics that I hope you'll find interesting. Starting and running a business or organization is like so many things. It takes persistence, perseverance, and patience. I worked part-time jobs for 9 years before Arkansas Flag and Banner grew enough to support just me. It's now grown so much that to operate efficiently, we require 10 departments and 25 people to maintain them, thus reminding us all again that small businesses are not only the fuel of our economic engine, but also impact and empower people's lives. Before we start, I want to introduce you to the people at the table. We have my technician, Tim, who'll be running the board and taking your calls. Say hello, Tim.
Hello, Tim.
My guest today is attorney Gary Greene, founder of the Law Offices of Gary Greene. I love that title. Greene is admitted to practice law for the Arkansas State and Federal Courts, the Texas, Missouri, and Oklahoma State Courts, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, the United States Court of Federal Claims, and the United States Supreme Court. Greene is a graduate of Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas, and in 1978, he received his law degree from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock School of Law. It wasn't until 1991 that he established the Law Offices of Gary Greene. Greene's area of practice include personal injury, medical negligence, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, traumatic brain injury, truck wrecks, product liability, wrongful death, and fire. His professional memberships include the American Association of Justice, Arkansas Trial Lawyers Association, Pulaski County Bar Association, Arkansas Bar Association, and past president of Southern Trial Lawyers Association. Gary is a husband, father, farmer, fisherman, land developer, and an author of children's book. It is an honor to welcome to the table the smart, successful, competent, and forthright attorney, counselor Gary Greene.
Thank you, Kerry. Glad to be here.
Thank you. We need to tell everybody that I've known you for a long time because they don't realize this, but when I started Arkansas Flag and Banner in 1975, I was living in Little Rock, and I moved into an apartment in 1976, and I lived in the basement apartment, and you lived right above me.
And it was a grand time.
It was.
A grand place.
And for people that are in Little Rock that are our age, Island X was across the street on Kavanaugh.
Island X and Gumbo Yaya.
See, I forgot
Which
about
came
that.
first?
Island X.
Okay.
By far.
All right.
And I remember this about you. I would come up there and say, Gary, we're going out, because we were 21. We were 21, 22. And when I'd say, Gary, we're going out, come go out with us. And you'd be sitting, I can still see you sitting at your desk, holding your head in your hands, and saying, no, I've got to stay in and study. And I thought, oh, Lord, I don't ever want to be a lawyer. That sounds awful.
That must have been first year.
Did it get better?
Oh, yeah. You stop studying after the first year.
Oh, hear that, lawyers? If you can make it through the first year, students, you'll be good to go. I haven't seen you in 10 years, though.
It's been a long time.
A long time.
Yeah.
And when I got to do this research on you, I found out that you're a farmer and an author of children's books. I was just kind of shocked. So we're going to talk about all of that. But first, you graduated from law school in 1978, but you didn't start the law offices of Gary Greene until 1991. So that's like 13 years, 12 or 13 years. What were you doing?
I was working with other lawyers. I have been privileged to have practiced with many lawyers in the county. Milas Hale, one of my mentors, John Ward, mentioned as one of my mentors. The Morleys, I worked in North Little Rock, and my first years in practice were pretty much the opposite of what I do now. I was doing more real estate work, more business work, more defense work. And since 1991, and really a little bit before, I've done nothing but plaintiff work and personal injury and contingency fee cases.
What's the difference between those two? One goes to court and one goes to trial and one doesn't?
Well, representing the plaintiff is generally representing a consumer. You're
Okay.
representing people. When you're representing the defendant, you're normally representing an insurance company. And it's just a totally different world and a totally different practice, and I very much prefer representing people in their individual cases.
When I was on your website, you coined the phrase people's
A people's practice.
a people's practice.
Yes. That I really stole it from Milas Hale. That's what he referred to our practice when we were together in North Little Rock. And I was very fortunate back in the Clinton years when Clinton was governor. He appointed one of my partners to a judgeship. He appointed John Ward to become a circuit judge. And up until that time, John had done all of the personal injury in our firm. And I had done, like I said, real estate and business work. And John came to me and said, I want you to be the one to handle these cases. And to this day, I don't know if he was doing it because he was doing me a favor or if he was doing it because he wanted me to finish what he had started.
So you mean you were in the back office reading all that legal jargon that drives everybody crazy that we have to hire you to do for us, and he came in and changed your job description?
He came in and put 50 cases in my lap.
Was he retiring?
No, he was going to the bench. He was going to become a circuit judge. And when you practice, when you're a circuit judge, you can't continue your practice.
So you're sitting in this office thinking that you're going to do this forever, just be pushing papers around and writing for other lawyers to take to court.
Yes, or real estate transactions or business transactions or boring stuff like that.
You didn't go to court.
Back then, not so much.
And then he comes in and dumps 50 cases on your desk.
Yes.
And says, here you go.
These are yours.
What did you think?
I was very pleased and proud that he'd thought of me to do it. There were other lawyers there he could have called upon. I was happy to do it. I really, quite frankly, thought I was too good to be a personal injury lawyer. I was kind of uppity, and I was a business lawyer. And I took them on as a duty, and by the time I finished, I was in love with it.
Wow. So when did you decide to leave that law firm and start your own, the law offices of Gary Greene?
Oh, that with John was in the, I can't remember the exact year, it was in the 80s. In 91 is when I left the lawyers who were still there. At one time we had probably 21, 22 partners. And it was one of those moments when we all decided, and it was together, and we knew that we'd built something that was bigger than we wanted to mess with. And we let attrition take its toll. And we went from 21 to 20 and 19 to 18, and it finally dwindled down to 4 or 5 lawyers left. And that's when I took my leave. We were down to a very, very small firm.
Well, why did you want it to get smaller?
I don't like meetings. And with the larger firms, there were lots of meetings. We had to...
But when it got small, you didn't like it again.
Oh, when it got small, no, I do like it small. I do like it small.
But you decided to leave when it got down to, I'm confused.
There were three or four partners when I left.
Why did you leave? Was there something that happened that you said,
No. At the time that I left, it was Milas Hale, who was still there, Butch Hale, who was still there, and Virgil Young, and myself. And we still are very dear friends. I've referred tax business to Virgil within the last week. He refers personal injury cases to me. But we had such different practices that it just made sense.
Oh, I see.
And then there's the geography of the river. I hate to admit that I've been one has bought into the North Little Rock and the river, but I moved to Little Rock. And at the time, my practice was in North Little Rock, and I just didn't want to make that drive back and forth.
At least you were going in the right direction.
Yeah, maybe so.
You were going against the traffic instead
Yeah.
of with the traffic.
Yeah.
You were going from Little Rock to North Little Rock, which is the opposite of the way most people are going. But anyway, I understand what you're saying.
made
I
for
did
a
the
long
same
drive.
thing.
You grew up in North Little Rock, and you know that they're both beautiful cities, but you don't want to necessarily do that traverse of the river twice a day.
Yeah, so now you're back working for a big firm again, though.
No.
How many lawyers you have?
Once again, we've downsized. The attorneys are just myself and my daughter, Casey, and then we have about 10 support staff. There's usually around a dozen of us in the office.
That's all the attorneys you have in that big Gary Greene building over there on Cantrell Road?
Which is for sale and for lease, and then let me rent you some space.
I saw that on your website. It says space for rent. I thought,
Yeah.
what is he doing? Now he's
Yeah.
getting into the rental business.
We are downsizing. That building, looking back, when you're looking for the perfect spot, at the time, I needed a building that was probably a little less than half that size. But as you might recall from buying an old building, I found one that was priced right, that was more than twice what I needed.
And in a great location.
And it's a great location, and I made it work.
It's like a billboard for your business right there.
It is, indeed.
So your daughter came to work for you in 2012. How is that?
It's great. I love it. I hope that she does. I think that she does, but I absolutely love it.
Is she a personal injury lawyer?
Indeed. That's 99% of what we do.
So you have 4 kids. Did you talk her into being an attorney with you, or did she just have the calling?
It took some talking, and it was eventually her decision, of course. But I probably, if I made a mistake anywhere, I leaned on her too hard. She went to seminary first. I decided that was not her cup of tea, and then came back and decided to go to law school.
She is smart.
Yes, she's very smart.
Seminary school is tough.
Yeah.
And law school, everybody knows, is tough.
I went out to visit with her one time, and she invited me to go to one of her classes, and I was sitting in the back of the room, and they were arguing over how many angels could fit on the tip of a pinhead, and I knew then she wasn't going to finish that program. I saw her eyes roll.
So I guess this is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll get advice from Gary on what makes a good case and what doesn't. We will also have him educate us on what I believe is an upcoming ballot issues. Do we have upcoming ballot issues?
We do have upcoming ballot
that are
issues,
important, that we all need to know about
yes.
before we go into the ballot box, I think. And is one of them tort reform?
One is a tort reform.
Okay,
yes.
we're going to talk about that. And you're going to, don't embarrass me because I don't know legal jargon. You're going to have to dumb it down for me. Can you do that?
I don't need to, but I'll make it simple
thanks.
for me.
And if you've missed any part of this show, a podcast will be made available next week on flagandbanner.com's website, YouTube, Blog Talk, and iTunes.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. My guest today is Little Rock, Arkansas attorney Gary Greene, founder of the law offices of Gary Greene. All right, Gary, you have the best website. I've been on it all morning. And this is what I found that you say. I am proud to have on my staff some of the best lawyers in the states of Arkansas and Tennessee, some of the best support personnel one could hope for, proud of the work we do suing drunk drivers, and proud that we represent people, not insurance companies, who, without our taking percentage fees, probably would not be able to hire a lawyer. I am proud of our people's practice.
I am.
Talk about how your fee, we just, before the break, you talked about the people's practice and how you coined that phrase. I think you said, being a lawyer, that you even got it trademarked or copyrighted?
Copyrighted, trademarked, I've forgotten what it's called. It's been so long since I did it, but I have the plaque behind my desk, and I can keep other people from using the same words.
I can't believe that. Those are just words.
Yeah, I know. I slipped in.
You know, we had a patent lawyer, a copyright lawyer on here, Joe Calhoun, and he educated all of us on the difference between a copyright and a trademark, and I can't even remember all the different stuff. But
I'll go back and listen to his podcast. I know Joe; he's a great guy, and I'm sure I can learn something.
you can. In fact, I ended up hiring him to trademark my name, flagandbanner.com. Okay, let's talk about your fee, because this is really what is the epitome of your people's practice, is the way your fees are.
The percentage fee for many, many eons has been called the poor man's key to the courthouse, the contingent fee. And when you think about it, it's very true. The litigation that we do for people is extremely expensive. It's extremely time-consuming. If you're paying someone by the hour to do it, even if it's a low hourly rate, the number of hours that go in and the fees to expert witnesses and the filing fees for the courthouse and the deposition fees for the stenographers, etc., gets into the scores of thousands of dollars. So a person who wasn't a rich person before they got knocked down to their knees can't come in and hire a silk suit lawyer unless they're able to do it with a percentage fee. And a friend of mine just recently, I was talking to him about doing some business litigation, and he says, what I'm looking for is a partner. He says, I'm looking for a partner to take on a case that he and I are going to work together. And I said, that's what I do every day with all of my clients and have for the last 37 years. So you do become partners. I mean, you know, people who want to talk about the business and the profession of law say, first of all, you shouldn't be partners with your clients. You're an advisor. You're someone who's trying to be independent. But when you are representing somebody on a percentage fee, the client is in control. The client's case is the only thing that matters, but really you're partners. You know, you're both working toward the same goal.
So I think the process would be somebody calls you and explains to your staff their case. And if it sounds like they have a case, you probably have them come in and you discuss it in detail. And if you feel like it's able to go to trial and you're able to win it based on the information that they gave you, that's when you take it on. Because you don't just take on anybody that comes in.
Well, you can't. I mean, you're in business, you're in a profession, you're also in a business. I think that case selection is key.
Case selection.
Yes. And you've got to take on the cases that you know you're the best lawyer for that job. And when you hear about a case that somebody else is the best lawyer for the job, then you've got to tell your client that.
Right, because each lawyer specializes in what they do.
For example, we just mentioned Joe Calhoun.
Right.
If someone came to me and they wanted to copyright or trademark something, I would say you need to call Joe.
So how many cases, of the cases you hear, what percentage of them you think are viable and winnable?
Oh, a tough question. Let me turn it around on you, though.
Okay.
I think that a good way to understand that we're not ambulance chasers and we're not looking for frivolous lawsuits is to look at the number of cases we do turn down. And I think that if you look at medical malpractice cases, that's probably a better indication. Truly, I will visit with 100 people about their case before I take one case. I truly weed out 99% of the people who contact me because of medical malpractice or because of alleged medical malpractice.
People love to have a problem with a doctor or poor outcome with a dentist or a doctor, and your friends will say you need to sue them. But it's not that easy.
It's very difficult.
It's very difficult.
it's usually not malpractice. You know, we got to start with our hats off to the doctors. Most of them are very smart. They're very well educated. They're very resourceful, and they probably didn't make the mistake that the client feels that they might have made. So there's a lot of trying to find out what happened.
And it can't just be a mistake. Doesn't it have to show negligence or malicious intent or something like that? It can't just be, oh, I accidentally did this. That's not really a lawsuit, is it?
Well, negligence and accident can be toward the same thing. In a negligence case, you've got to have somebody who was negligent, that they didn't do something they should have done, or they did something they shouldn't have done, and that negligence caused injury that wouldn't have happened but for the negligence. You've got to tie it together.
And you have to be able to set up, you have to be able to say, this is negligent because this is standard practice and you didn't follow standard practice.
Yes, and it caused permanent injury. It caused serious permanent injury.
If you go look at most doctors' records, and if you think that, you know, something's wrong with you and you ask them to send you your records and you look at them, they never put blame on anybody or any other doctor. Let's say you have something bad happen with one doctor and you go to another doctor to get treatment for it. And that doctor says, well, the other doctor shouldn't have done this. But they never put that in the notes. They just are very... they're just very literal about, you know, whatever it was and what the problem was, but they never express any kind of, you know what I'm trying to say?
You're talking about the conspiracy of silence.
Is that a real thing?
I think it's course 101 in med school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, they don't. But here's the trick to that. It's kind of like the Constitution. In our Constitution, we've got checks and balances, and we've got the legislative branch, and we've got the judicial branch, and we've got the press. We've got ways to keep up with what's going on, and you do the same in a medical malpractice case, because if you get a one set of records from one doctor, you're right. It's not going to lay blame somewhere else. But then you get the other doctor's records. And then you get the nurse's notes, and then you'll get the discharge summary, and then you get every piece of information that's ever been generated about that patient. And you'll start to find from the testing that was done, and from the comments that were made, and from the other entries that were made, you'll be able to find out what happened.
And if your problem doesn't come up for, let's say, a year, and then you go, oh, you know, now I've got a problem like that mesh stuff that everybody's having problems with. What's that called?
Surgical mesh or hernia mesh?
Yeah, that you see on TV all the time. Most stuff, if it comes up in a year with something that's a surgery or something you had done, you only have 2 years.
That's right.
To go to court, no matter what.
We can find exceptions sometimes, but to be safe, you've got to think 2 years for a medical malpractice case.
So if you're sitting around thinking about this, listeners out there, and you're thinking, should I or shouldn't I, should I or shouldn't I? You've only got 2 years to make a decision, and the lawyer needs how long to prepare a case?
We won't accept a case that's within 120 days of the statute of limitations.
What is that?
4 months.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gosh. So
and think about it. We've got to go and get the records, and it takes a long time to get records. And then we're not doctors. We don't know the medicine. We've got to then hire experts to read those records, and to get that done within 4 months is
pushing it
very much.
Your other specialty is drunk drivers.
Yeah, that's like shooting fish in a barrel, but yes, it's a specialty.
What do you mean? It's just so easy because
Yes.
they test at the job because when they are drunk they give them a breath test and it's right there that the driver was drunk.
You know, when you're a plaintiff's lawyer like I am, you want to make the jury mad or you want to make them cry, and you go in with a drunk driver defendant and they're mad, and you better get out of the way because the verdict's going to be a bigger verdict.
Really?
Yes. Even though we're not supposed to, when we're in court, talk about the golden rule, we're not to tell the jury that put themselves in the shoes of the plaintiff. They can't help it in a drunk driver case.
You can't say that in court?
You can't say anything that suggests to the jury that they should put themselves in the shoes of the plaintiff.
I didn't know that.
It's considered such a strong argument that it's not fair.
Wow.
Yes.
Medical negligence, medical malpractice, what's the difference?
Nothing. Medical negligence probably sounds easier. Medical malpractice, to me, has a feeling of intent or a bad feeling about it. Mm-hmm. And when you're trying a medical negligence case, really all you're trying to do is show that the doctor ran a stop sign. Didn't intend to run the stop sign,
right?
But ran a stop sign and caused damages.
Mm-hmm. I bet this one's easy. Nursing home negligence.
They are easy. It's a different type of case, and the cases are usually made not so much based upon the negligence that was done at the time, but upon the staffing.
It's always the staffing.
Yes, and they don't hire enough people.
Why do they not do that?
It's money. They don't want to spend the money.
That's the problem at my mother's place. And her place, when we went there 6 years ago, was wonderful. The teachers' retirement fund owned them, and it's sold twice to two corporations, and now they're just cut back. And
tough cases, and the way that you win those is you go find an ex-employee and who's no longer there, and no longer bound to the employment agreements and no longer bound to the pressures of that. And then you talk to that ex-employee and find out their MO and find out what they didn't do and should have done.
it seems like, from a business point of view, it would be smarter for the corporations to do a good job of training and staffing than to be paying high insurance and lawyers to fight these claims all the time.
You'd think.
You would think that. I mean, from a business point of view, I would think that. Traumatic brain injury, truck wrecks, same things?
Same thing. Traumatic brain injury, to me, is a very, very interesting area of the practice, and I've kind of made it a specialty. And the reason I find it so interesting is because there are things like denial that go with a traumatic brain injury, like in alcoholism. But a traumatically injured person usually is in denial that he or she is injured.
Really?
Yes. And you therefore, you've got to go to the next layer. You've got to go to the spouse or to the parent or to someone who knows and lives with the traumatically brain injured person to find out what the deal is. Because if you ask a traumatically brain injured person, are you okay today? The answer is yes.
So they're not the ones that ever call you. It's their spouse that calls
Yes.
you and says, something's wrong with my wife or husband
Yes.
or son. Would you help me? And then how do you ever get, if they're not, so that does seem very hard, because if they're in denial, how do you ever get them to tell you their story or be involved?
Well, I get their trust by asking them to do a couple of things. For example, I might ask them to look behind themselves and check the rearview mirror, to pretend they're driving and look behind themselves. And then when they turn back around, I might say, "Did you get a little dizzy?" And they'll have felt that, and it'll start to dawn upon them that something might have happened. Another good technique is to say, "Tell me the last thing that you remember before the wreck." And they'll tell you, "I remember the truck coming at me." And then your next question is, "Okay, tell me what your first memory was after the wreck." And they'll say, "Well, I was at the hospital." And then it starts to dawn on them that they did have a loss of consciousness, which is, for many neuropsychologists, the definition of brain injury. If there is a significant loss of consciousness, there probably has been a brain injury. But you get the client to realize that by recreating with them their memories.
I think you've got a caller. Let's see if this is a real call. You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy and Gary Greene. Have you got a question for me or my caller?
Well, I have a correction.
Okay.
Gary mentioned that TBI patients were very often in denial, and that's really not the case because it's called deficit awareness.
Okay.
So a person with a TBI very often is not cognitively aware of their problems, so they're not denying anything. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Well taken.
Well, and I think that's why a good neuropsychological and a functional evaluation is what's needed to really assist the individual in regaining some of their functionality.
I agree on the neuropsychologist.
Okay, that's all I
I
had.
certainly do.
Thanks for your call.
Thank you.
Thanks for your feedback. Product liability. What is that, Matt? Your baby swallows a button off the stuffed toy.
Yes, it's any dangerous product put into the chain of commerce and causes harm. We mentioned a moment ago, we were talking about statutes of limitations for medical malpractice cases, and
Yeah.
we talked about the mesh injuries. I would posit that a mesh injury is a product liability case, and therefore subject to the 5-year deadline rather than the 2.
Oh, all right. Good to know. Which one's your favorite thing to talk about? Which one of these is, or not to talk about, which one of these is your favorite case to try? The drunk driver you said is like shooting
Well,
fish in a barrel.
there's one type that's even easier,
Oh,
and that's legal malpractice.
legal malpractice.
Yes.
Your job?
Yes, to sue another lawyer for dropping the ball on case. I tried one in July of this year. The offer that was made to us prior to the trial was $350,000, and the jury came back with a $2 million verdict.
Really? Do you ask for a certain amount of money and then they can up it?
Well, you can. There's discretion there, and my argument to the jury in closing was that this lady I represented had lost a kidney, and therefore we had the issue of permanence, and we had the issue of the anxiety that it caused her. So my suggestion to them was that each of those elements was worth $1 million, and then the other things, the medical bills or whatever, they could consider on top. They came back very quickly with a $2 million verdict.
And that was because her first lawyer did not do a good job of representing her.
Well, he did not finish the filing. It was a 2-year deadline medical malpractice case. He filed it on the next to the last day. And then in Arkansas, you've got 120 days to serve the papers on the defendant. And he never served the papers.
What?
So by the time they figured out that they didn't have service of process, the statute of limitations had run. And it was impossible to do anything else except to file a legal malpractice case.
Against him because you couldn't do it for the medical malpractice because it
Yes.
had expired. It had gone over the 2 years.
Correct.
That seems like such a easy mistake to have not made.
Indeed, but we all make mistakes.
That's true. How do you know if you've got a good case? And then we're going to go to break.
You've got to have good people. You've got to represent people that you like, and you've got to represent people who want to get up and go to work every morning.
But if you're the person that's fixing to call you, before they call you and waste everybody's time, is there some list of punch list that they could go down and say, I have a good case, or I don't have a good case?
It so much depends upon the type of case that really I couldn't. I couldn't.
There's no punch list.
Make punch
Just call
list.
you.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue to get advice from Gary. We'll be taking phone calls, and we'll have him educate us on the upcoming ballot issues that you need to know about before you go into the voting booth. And if you miss any part of this show, a podcast will be made available next week on flagandbanner.com's website, YouTube, Blog Talk, and iTunes.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. My guest today in Little Rock, Arkansas, attorney Gary Greene, founder of the Law Offices of Gary Greene. Another one of your quotes from your website, Gary, was you said, I was lucky to have family, friends, teachers who encouraged and guided me. When asked why do I continue to practice law, you said, because it's what I do best. In my mind, being a lawyer is no different and no more important than being a bricklayer or a carpenter or a mechanic. I go to them when I need their help and hope they will come to me when they need mine. That's good.
Definitely what I do best.
Your wife-
Definitely don't be working on your car.
You would work all the time if your wife didn't make you come home.
I would. I love to work.
You know, and a lot of people think of work, I just recently realized this, a lot of people think of work as work, but a lot of us think of work as being creative.
That's right.
It's a creative outlet. And when you're doing a type of job that you feel like you're being creatively satisfied, it's not work anymore.
That's correct.
Tell me about your mentors. John Ward.
Retired attorney, retired circuit judge. He's the one who put those 50 cases in my lap.
Yeah, he was a game changer.
Yes, he was.
Miles Hale.
The one who gave to me the inspiration for a people's practice. Miles and I, when we practiced together, there was no case too small. We had a lot of them, and there was no case too small.
That's nice. Gary Eubanks.
I think probably the maverick, the pioneer for lawyer advertising in this state, definitely, and probably regionally, if not throughout the nation.
Did you know that you and I are both the sponsors for the AETN Vietnam War documentary by Ken Burns?
They told me I was a sole sponsor.
They did not. I think you and I are the only two, though.
Well, I'm very, very happy to be doing it. I'm glad you brought it up, too. I know it starts this month, and I hope that we can give them a plug as far as what nights to watch it. I think it's going to be great.
Yes, we've got it on the Arkansas, you need to put it on your website. We've got it on Flag and Banner's website. We've got a slide with all the dates and the times, and they're going to play it they were going to play it I think they were going to run the series 3 times, but now I think they're going to run this series 4 times and play it like every Saturday for 10 Saturdays in a row, but that won't be till November or December. So if you want to watch the whole thing, it starts in September.
And it's a 10-part series, is that right?
That's right.
I'll catch them all eventually.
Record it.
Yeah.
And so when you're up at night, you can turn it on and watch it. It's got, I'm a AETN PBS lover. I watch it all the time. And I see you on there. And I know you are too, because I see you on there all the time. You're always advertising with them. And this documentary has been in the works for 10 years. It's got footage that's never been seen before.
And to me, it is the opportunity for this country to acknowledge the Vietnam vets in a way they were never acknowledged at the time of the Vietnam War.
That is exactly what I said to Martin the other day when he asked me for a quote. And I said, it's time we gave them their due.
Yeah.
You also give credit to your parents and your grandparents to follow the golden rule. What's the golden rule?
I was trying to teach that to Reese yesterday, and I found
Who's
that,
Reese?
Older grandson,
Okay.
4 years old in November. But I think I got through to him that you do to others as you would have them do unto you. And I kind of make fun of that on my webpage as far as my parents and grandparents taught me the golden rule, and then my law professors told me to ignore it. And of course, we talked earlier about when you're trying a case to a jury, it's improper argument to mention or imply the golden rule.
Although you can't say, put yourself in their shoes, in the plaintiff's shoes.
You can say imagine.
Imagine.
Yeah, that's one
There's
way.
always a lawyer trick to
Yeah.
everything. So the other thing I love about you when I went on your website is you have a whole page dedicated to lawyer jokes.
Sometimes, Kerry, you've just got to embrace it.
I thought that was real. I wanted to tell a lawyer joke. I thought, that is so tacky. I did that to the poor police chief. I told that police joke, and he was like, yeah, that's not funny. And then I went on your website, and I was like, he's got a whole list of them. And you started them in 1995. Your jokes go back to 1995.
Yes.
You launched your website in 1995?
95 or 96.
Me too.
We get a lot of people sending us jokes. They'll apparently, when you look up lawyer jokes on Google, our webpage pops up.
That's one way to get SEO, search engine optimization, for you people out there that don't know what SEO means. But I hear there are changes coming to our courts. You need to educate us. What's coming down the pike?
Senate Joint Resolution 8 is on the ballot for November. It is a tort reform measure, And it's been done very craftily on a couple of fronts, and they're going to fool people. They've already fooled people. And if you've been approached at the grocery store to please sign this petition, they will say all it does is limit or cap lawyer fees. And that's true. It does limit and cap lawyer fees, but more importantly, it places a value on life, and it caps a value on life of $500,000, which sounds like a lot of money maybe, until we follow the golden rule and put ourselves in the shoes of the person who's lost their life or lost a limb or lost their ability to have quality of life. So they painted the picture on the back, they painted the target on the backs of the attorneys to get people to think, because like I told you, the easiest case to try is a legal malpractice case. Nobody likes lawyers. I guess they all like their lawyer, but in general, the group is not well respected. And they think that if they can gig the lawyers on reducing the fee, then the populace who's voting this in won't notice that they've just capped the value of their life in case they need their day in court.
So what's the name of this?
I think it's known as Senate Joint Resolution 8.
Senate Joint Resolution 8 is going to be in the ballot in what month?
November.
Of this year?
Yes.
And it's being touted as putting a cap on a lawyer fees?
Yes, only. That's the only thing they mention
But it
most
also
times.
puts a cap on what the plaintiff can receive.
Yes, very, very much so.
And you're saying it can only be $500,000? So that $2 million case for that lady who lost a kidney, she could only have gotten $500,000?
Correct.
For all, is it malpractice only?
It's all cases.
For all cases?
Yes.
For truck drivers, when you lose your life, for every one of those personal injury topics that we talked about.
Yes.
The maximum you could ever get is $500,000.
Yes. There are, I assume that there are ways to prove damages in excess of the $500,000 if, for example, there's a lost wage claim. The $500,000 does limit itself to the, what I'll call for the purposes of this conversation, pain and suffering, and the general damages that are proven at trial. Specific damages are the damages for lost income or the amount of your medical bills or whatever. So I think that your verdicts can be $500,000 plus whatever your specials are.
So you can piggyback on that.
You can piggyback to some extent, but on the lady that we just talked about, they probably wouldn't have exceeded a $500,000 verdict.
Is she able to work?
She is working, and that's one reason that the jury liked her. We put on testimony that when she goes to work, it is a chore, and that when she climbs to the top of the stairs, she sometimes doesn't have her breath when she gets there, but she goes to work because she loves it.
So that's coming out in November. We all need to go and vote. Or did they trick us in the way they did it, like vote for or vote against? You know how sometimes they do the wording and you think you're voting against it, but you're really voting for it?
You're voting to change our Constitution, so it would be a vote against amending the Constitution.
And it's going to be called Senate
Joint Resolution 8.
That's really good. And is that the tort reform?
That is the tort reform.
Is there anything else we need to know about?
Those are the main things. The limit on the value of life and general damages and the attorney's fee cap.
All right, this is our last break. And when we come back, Gary's going to tell us about his other passions besides working. Can you believe that? And if you miss any part of this show, a podcast will be made available next week on flagandbanner.com's website, YouTube, Blog Talk, and iTunes.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. We'll be right back.
Do you watch lawyer shows?
You know, I used to watch LA Law. I remember going into a courtroom one day, and the judge had seen the program the night before, and interestingly, our facts were the very same. And she kind of looked at me and said, "Did you see that show last night?" And luckily for me, I was on the side of the good guy, and in the show he won, and we won too.
What a good little tidbit. We picked the right music for that. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. My guest today is the forthright Gary Greene, founder of the law offices of Gary Greene in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with him and his daughter, and they can help you if you think you've got a case. And we'll do that in 5 minutes at the end of the show. In addition to practicing law, you have a subdivision, a pecan grove, a vineyard, and this is my favorite. You've written 2 books for your grandchildren. Say the name of that one.
Grand-Père Bear. That's the first one I wrote.
That's for what age?
It's really for a 2nd grader through a 5th grader.
And grand-père means grandfather?
Grandfather in French.
So I'm taking these books. I'm nabbing them from him. And then what's this one?
An American Bear in Paris.
This is for?
Probably junior high, high school, maybe young adult. It's 100 pages long. And I think that almost any age group would appreciate it.
You know, I'm going to have you sign them. I'm going to have you do this one to my granddaughter, Evelyn. And I'm going to have you do this one to my grandson, Marshall.
I'll be happy to.
Because that's exactly their age groups. And then you handed me another one that you signed for me that's still printed out on paper.
It publishes next month.
And it's called?
A Day with Grand-Père.
You are so cute. I cannot believe that you do that. You find time to do all of that. Now, you've got a vineyard.
I do.
It's muscadine.
Yes.
Where?
Petit Mountain. Started off with grapes and muscadines, and indeed this week I'm pulling out the last of the grapevines.
Do you make any money at that?
Absolutely not. You ever talk to a duck hunter who says, well, that duck cost me $1,000?
Yeah.
My wine, if I were selling it, would be at least $1,000 a bottle.
You don't even look like you drink wine.
Oh, I love wine.
You do?
And if you want a pecan pie, those are probably $1,000 pecan pies, too.
Yeah, you have a pecan grove. Is it on the same vineyard?
No, different property. It's on the Little Red River. A property that I acquired to go trout fishing. And then, I'm a workaholic, so I had to have some pecan trees, too.
So when you go up there, you can't just relax. You got to do work on pecan trees.
Yeah.
Who takes care of that property? That's what I always wonder about people that have these.
I have neighbors who help me as far as mowing grass, that kind of stuff.
So pecan trees don't need a lot of taking care of, I guess.
They do. More than I thought.
Aren't they kind of
High
delicate?
maintenance.
Yeah, they're kind of delicate, aren't they? They won't produce pecans if you don't.
Yeah.
Is it true that if you don't pick up your pecans the year before that they won't produce in the next year?
No, I don't think that that's true. They do tell you to rake up everything to cut down on the disease for the tree, et cetera. So I guess it could be true to the extent that if you allowed the disease to develop, it would affect. But no, I think that we just have some good years and some bad years as a general rule.
How many acres is it?
50 acres on the pecans.
And then how about the vineyard?
It's probably on a 2-acre spot.
So it's not too big.
No.
And then and then your trout fishing, it's really just for trout fishing. That's really why you bought it, like you said. So
Yes.
you're not trying to make any money at that at all.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
So how do people get in touch with you?
I think it would be hard not to be able to find me if the amount of money I spend for advertising is any indication. But we're on the web, ggreene.com.
It's amazing because I know you, and you are a soft-spoken, I would probably categorize you as an introvert, but you go to trial.
Yes.
You try them yourself.
Yes. I am an introvert. I very much appreciate my time alone. I appreciate the time that I spend working on the pecan trees or working on the grapes or whatever. But to me, being a lawyer is my job, it's my profession, and even though I'm nervous when I start talking to the jury.
Every time?
Every time. I power through it, yeah.
That is so encouraging for our listeners. You just have to, everybody's nervous. Sometimes people think, oh, you just got all the answers and everything's just so natural and easy for all of us put our pants on one leg at a time, and we all have to fight our demons to be successful.
Absolutely. You got to take the first step.
How do you take that first step? How did you ever decide, I'm going to do this?
You got to read the book.
Oh, the Grand-Père Bear?
Yes.
Oh, isn't that good?
But you imagine it, you tell people you're going to do it, then you do it.
Where do you get these books? Amazon?
Yes, you can get them on Amazon. And that's the best place to get them, really.
Did you have to publish a bunch of them, print a bunch of them up?
No, you don't have to this day and time. You can literally print a book.
A book.
When I did this, I got 100 copies.
These are hardbacks.
Uh-huh.
You print 100. You can literally print a hardback.
Yes.
That's really good to know. So, any last words of advice? Go to vote this November.
Go to vote this November. Follow the rule of 3. That's probably the best advice I've got to give to anybody.
What's that mean?
A persuasion technique that makes it easier to remember things and to say things and to have things recalled in the future to simplify your life.
Say that again. The persuasion of 3. What does that mean?
The rule of 3. It's in the book, too.
Oh, gosh, I gotta go home. I gotta read this before I give it to the grandkids. All right, what's the rule of 3?
The rule of 3 is that it's easier to remember sequences of 3 rather than 1 or 2 or 4 or 5. And Churchill is probably one of the best examples. When you think of Churchill and you think of his great speeches, you think of, we'll fight them on the streets, we'll fight them in the skies, we'll fight them on the beaches. It's going to take our toil, our sweat, and our tears. And when he said that, it's going to take our toil, blood, sweat, toil, and tears. And history has shortened it to 3. We can remember things in terms of 3 more easily than anything else. So, beginning, middle, end. If you want to think about ways to remember things, group them into 3. You can have a 39-point trial or speech memorized if you take it in terms of 3, and then each of those points has 3 points that you're going to make, and each of those points has 3 points you're going to make. It's just the best thing that I've run across as far as being successful and getting things down to simple terms.
The rule of 3.
The rule of 3.
That is some of the best advice I've ever been given. Wow, it is, Gary, I've loved visiting with you. I haven't seen you in so long. It's been a real joy. Congratulations on your success.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. I have a gift for you.
Oh,
Where all do
nice.
you practice law?
Really, right now, I would call myself all over the country, but most of my cases are in Arkansas.
Well, I gave you Arkansas, according to your website, I gave you Arkansas. This is for our listeners, I'm giving Gary a desk set for him to take to his office. It's got the U.S. flag, the Arkansas flag, Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, because your website says you do all
Yes,
of those.
we do. Thank you.
And I
How-
gave you some
how
extra
thoughtful.
holes in those bases in case you branch out into other states.
I shall. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who's our guest next week?
Next week is going to be Susie Cohen of the local First Arkansas Business Alliance.
I've never met her. She's a young woman who has started like 3 businesses. She's a young entrepreneur, and I'm going to be really interested to learn about her and to see what she's up to now. I think she has a magazine. Her goal, I think, is to align all these Arkansas businesses to buy locally.
Yeah, and apparently, from what I understand in the notes, we didn't reach out to her. She reached out wanting to be on the show.
That's a real
So I
entrepreneur.
think that's one of the first guests we've had that they came to us
Mhm.
instead of us reaching out to them.
That may be true. And
It's on our year anniversary.
That's right, everybody. Next week will be our 1-year anniversary. Who knew we'd be here a year later? Me, I knew. And to my listeners, if you have a great entrepreneurial story you would like to share, I would love to hear from you. Send a brief bio, like Susie did, and your contact info to questions@upyourbusiness.org, and someone will be in touch. And finally, to our listeners, thank you for spending time with me. If you think this program has been about you, you're right, but it's also been for me. Thank you for letting me fulfill my destiny. My hope today is that you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that it, whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
You've been listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. If you miss any part of the show or want to learn more about UIYB, go to flagandbanner.com and click on Radio Show. Like us on Facebook or subscribe to her weekly podcast wherever you like to listen. All interviews are recorded and posted the following week with links to resources you heard discussed on today's show. Underwriting opportunities available upon request. Kerry's goal is to help you live the American dream.